This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider.
Let's play whack-a-mole.
Boris Johnson calls it whack-a-mole, the test and trace system that'll find coronavirus in the UK and smack it down as fast as possible. A vast rapid response team is being set up to find people showing symptoms and all those they've been in contact with to make sure they self-isolate. It's possible that as the country comes out of lockdown, local areas, even single apartment blocks, could be put back into it. Our editorial column hopes it'll deliver a knockout blow to COVID-19, but it does have an issue.
If the government now has the capacity to test, trace and isolate people with the virus, then we will have to follow the rules, or it won't work. But does anyone know what they are? What's allowed and what isn't? When are schools coming back? Is it illegal now to drive to Wales? And why is none of this being explained in a systematic way? Of course, it's hard for governments to be certain. Scientific advice keeps changing, and there's always a balance to find between the risk to health and the threat to jobs and liberty. But other countries seem to be coming out of lockdown with more clarity and a steadier process. It would be better if the government felt able to be more honest about such dilemmas and more focused in setting out its response to them. Lots of us would like to do the right thing. If only we knew what it was.
Our political editor Joe Murphy is with me now. And Joe, test and trace sounds very ambitious. How's it going to work?
Oh, this is potentially, David, the launch of a very new and exciting era. Just incidentally, you might remember this used to be called test, track and trace, or track and trace. Well, they've dumped the word track, and the reason for that is quite interesting. They focus group tested it, and they found that people thought tracking sounded like the government was going to be following them around, especially using their phone to track their movements. And actually, it's nothing like that. So this is a huge operation. You're looking at 25,000 what they call contact tracers, who are the people that you'll speak to and interact with as members of the public. But in addition, you're looking at several thousand doctors and nurses. Many of them are retired people who've come back as volunteers, perhaps too old or too vulnerable to work on the front line in hospitals. And you've got 20,000 bureaucrats in addition in the background trying to make it all work. So you're looking at a total of about 50,000 people. This is an army of officials that didn't exist 2 months ago.
That is a huge number of people, but I wonder if a problem might be enforcing this, in making sure that people are staying at home if they are showing infection or if they know somebody who is showing the infection.
I know what you're getting at. You're wondering what happens if people pick up the phone and one of these contact tracers says, David, we happen to believe that you've been in close proximity to somebody who has tested positive to coronavirus or is symptomatic, and you reply, well, Dominic Cummings didn't stay at home. Why should I? And that is potentially a problem. If it turns out to be a problem, then there are fines and the powers to do spot checks at your home. But I'm told by officials that these powers are going to be very much kept locked away, because the belief in Whitehall is that you and me and the vast majority of people in the society really want to support the NHS, really want to crack down on this dreadful virus. And actually, we are pretty public spirited. I think that's true, don't you? I mean, I see the Thursday night clap and every street seems to take it up. It's a wonderful sense of community. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said to me yesterday he's going to call on people's civic duty, but he says it's there. We don't need to call on it so much as just help it. And the chief of the testing programme, Professor John Newton, told us last night that if you're rung by a contact tracer, you won't be given sort of vague advice. You'll be given clear instructions. And the emphasis was on instructions, which you should follow. And you shouldn't follow your, inverted quotes, instincts. You should simply do what you're told.
And I've been reading about potentially local lockdowns, Joe? Is there a possibility that small kind of micro areas could find themselves put into lockdown if there's a number of cases?
Yes, this is the really interesting new aspect. So at the moment, we've got a national lockdown where we're all obeying rules not to go out. From next week, the national lockdown eases. We're all allowed out a bit more. During the course of June, there's going to be more shopping, more non-essential shopping, more people going back to work. But the price of ending national lockdown is that we will lose individual or local freedoms in future if there is a flare-up. So the first thing is individual isolation. If we come into contact with somebody unwittingly who's carrying the virus potentially. But then secondly, and this is what you were talking about, local lockdowns. If, as they're bearing down on the virus, they notice there is a tower block where everybody keeps getting it, they could lock down that tower block while they find out what the heck's causing this and bear down on it. I mean, it could be that there is one basic problem in a place where the virus easily spreads, maybe a faulty air conditioning unit, or some people who are not behaving responsibly. That could then apply to a housing estate. It could apply to a hospital. In Milton Keynes, a hospital stopped taking new admissions because of COVID, and that's a sort of local lockdown. So you're looking at small levels, estates, hotels, hospitals, workplaces, that could be put into special measures, if you like.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.